Good evening from Yummy BTV. Wishing you all well, sending plenty of love your way as usual. Now, we're going to go back, way back to when the game first started. After all, we were all young at one stage, especially during the fake life that we talk about, and the sad life in reality we talk about so freely on Yummy BTV. Now, this one's a bit of an eye-opener, but also gives you tremendous insight into how many of us that got involved in crime and that life, and from being delinquents at school or having not much parenting and things, broken homes, etc. We ended up in homes from a very early age that basically shaped us on a way and a sad journey of mayhem, probably most of us, nearly all of our lives, unless we come out the other end and we tell the story. But this involves St. Thomas More in Southport, which was an approved school for bad boys and delinquents. I resonate with this story because after I was in St. Thomas More, but not the one in Southport. I was in West Grinstead, Horsham, Sussex, albeit a few years later after the story I'm going to tell you now. So I know what them approved schools were like. Ours were run. So that means there was a few St. Thomas More's approved schools for bad boys around the country at this kind of time. Now, our one was run by brothers, and I used to get slapped up a lot. I remember my first day in St. Thomas More's, I got moved from the children's home in Moser, and I was crying at the dinner table. We're looking around because you're not allowed out there. You're in the middle of the countryside. There's no going down the road to the shops and all that. It's now supervision time. It's almost like a young boy's prison, except that there's a little bit of schooling there. So the one, I was crying at the table on my own. I remember a few Everton and a couple of them Darren Reynolds. They used to come up. I knew a couple of boys from the children's homes before I'd been in. So you know that you're going to bump into many from the broken homes and being in children's homes environment, every single place you go to, in the stages where you move up to. Amazing that you can go from children's home to approved school to DC to Borstal training to YP to adult prison. It was mad, isn't it? And most of us went that way, but down to Southport now, St. Thomas More's. So this is in the 70s. Who was in there at this time? A young Curtiswarren. They were saying he was really cheeky from a very, very young age. Also, side by side with Curtis, tommyGiLday. Also there, Tommy Beveridge. And those were the Scousers, right? And many more. I heard the Manx were outnumbered by about 300 to 7 or something. I think the Scousers were on N wing, not or K wing, and the Manx was on N's wing or something like that, or the other way around, right? But the Manx there at that time, Tommy Morgan, I think Lenny Richardson, who was meant to have been the daddy at that time in that place, and also a well-known doorman that used to work on Lock 29 or something in Manchester, etc. Meant to be a real serious handful. I'm doing a piece on him soon. Stevebryan, who was kind of Colombian, South American looking, but very slim at this time. Someone says to me, during those young days when he was in there, he could have a serious row, and he was only slim, but he was fast and nippy, and blood probably shaped him later on in life. And some of these men I'm talking about now met on the doors or joined forces on the doors in Manchester years and years later. But during this time, right, I'm hearing that Curtiswarren, when the battles, because, the legendary Manx and Scousers, the kind of things that started from the crack of dawn where, they had that great rivalry at football, and they even had it at cricket as well for all kinds of Roses and the Whites, and that was us Leeds, Yorkshire, and blah, blah, blah. It was always like that, but it was taken, literally, nothing much has changed these days, but if you get what I mean, gangs and rivalries, they've been going on since the creation of Dawn now. With all the stuff going on, as young boys, because you get some that are ready to fight and all that when they're younger, and you also had the really sweet looking ones that really weren't as tough and as strong, but very mouthy or very vulnerable as well. You meet a lot of vulnerable boys in them homes as well that can't hold their hands up and that kind of stuff. But there was a lot of early beefs going on during that stage while they were all there, right? Now, Curtis, if you walked from the Scouse block past the Manc blocks, you're likely to get pelted with balls and things like that, or any kind of instrument you can get your hands on. But I heard Curtiswarren, right, smaller than a cheeky, so they say, used to run past there on his own every day, and they used to throw things out, but he still used to run past there every day and in the morning, right? And a little bit the same when the Mancs went that way as well, but probably I'm hearing they didn't get pelted as bad, but hey, word of mouth, somebody else could see it different. But it seems that Tommy Gilday, they were calling him the general from back then. And he was having loads of fights, Tommy Gilday. I think he had 4 or 5 fights with Tommy Morgan. I think the fights started with Tommy Gilday used to get the ump because he used to think he was taking a piss out of his accent, the Manchester lot. So he just used to start fighting, but really they liked him and it wasn't that. But Tommy Gilday was Tommy Gilday and the way he was and that kind of stuff. But one time I think they tried it with Curtis as well. So it's interesting that the relationship between them two from very, very young is definitely factual, that Curtis used to rely on the general, Tommy Gilday. He'd say, Tommy, and Tommy used to come running, and that kind of shows you a little bit, and I'm telling you, that's facts. We were all small once, right? We know how some of us grew in later life and probably made us stronger, those early bits of, institutionalization that shaped us. We learned how to, get better, harder, cleverer, if you get what I mean. But there was a suggestion that Tommy Gilday, right, I have a go at this, Tommy Gilday's meant to have been having a fight and put one of the Mancs' heads in some paint, right? And then apparently Lenny Richardson, he was the most feared one at that time, right? And a man that they all talked about. I think he was even round about the Hacienda, but someone you mentioned it earlier, right? There's a picture of him up there right now. Good thing you said that. I think him and Tommy Gilday had a little thing as well, right? But I don't know how that went. But I think Lenny would have been a bit bigger and stronger at that time, if you ask me. But I'm not too sure. I can't comment on that. So this went on for about a year, the childish stuff and that, because I know what rivalries are like. When I was in St. Thomas More, there was South London was predominantly holding, the bigger crew, and seems to be a bit more harder and more on the map than some of us lot. So with Liverpool and the Mancs, it was like something. Tommy Beveridge was there as well. Apparently, he was pretty wild at that age there. So I'm going to get more on this story for you in the young days. But it shows you, doesn't it? What a bunch to have at that time in that approved school in Southport. All names that along the years are feature in true crime stories, right? So we know it went for Curtis, Tommy Gilday. It was there for all to see, but by all intents and purposes, I'm sure there was one other bit I was meant to tell you about. We'll leave this as part 1, but trust me, this story is absolute fact. Loads of love. Be up later on.